and welcome to today's Japan coronavirus update. So now we have up to close to 4,000 infections here in Japan. And by looking at this graph, we can see a J-shaped curve indicating that there has been an exponential growth going on, at least with the confirmed cases in Japan. There has been a daily increase of about 300 in the past 3 days, and this is how many cases that were confirmed yesterday. So this site is not actually really accurate on like a real-time basis, but they do update their numbers very accurately if you give them about 24 hours for like each day. More coronavirus cases confirmed in Japan. People found to have the virus during arrival checks at airports, health ministry, and quarantine officials, as well as those who returned to Japan on chartered planes from China. So basically, there are multiple routes of where these infections are coming from, and that explains why Japan is seeing an increase of cases, whether it's from abroad or even in the epicenters such as Tokyo, Osaka, Kanagawa, Chiba, Aichi, and Hyogo. There's been talk among the government officials and just the people of Japan. They really want an emergency declaration said because these new cases seem to be more or less endemic rather than imported. They want people to stay home, and a declaration will justify a lot of the procedures that people need to take to mitigate the spread. Up until now, it was only like the government officials requesting people to stay home. It's just like a little nudge on the shoulders from the central government. And basically, such a lax approach, no one was really listening. And that can be contributed to, obviously, the increase of cases that we're seeing. And that's naturally going to happen because of the complacency. But new legislation has been passed in the midst of this epidemic that give new guidelines on what happens if an emergency declaration is said. Abe to declare state of emergency. Prime Minister Abe Shinzo has started final arrangements towards declaring a state of emergency over the coronavirus pandemic. The order will come on Tuesday at the earliest. So, what does an emergency declaration really do? Well, let's see. Under Japanese law, the Prime Minister can only declare a state of emergency when two conditions are met. First, a situation presenting a grave threat to lives and health. Second, a situation that would cause serious economic damage, harming the livelihoods of the public. The Prime Minister has authorities on which prefectures and over what period of time the declaration will cover. The governors of the designated areas will ask residents to stay at home except for what are deemed essential activities. The governors will also be able to request the closures of schools and other facilities capable of hosting large-scale gatherings. Unlike in countries such as like the US and France, the government cannot punish those who do not comply with the order. The governors cannot order shops to close, force workers to stay home, or suspend public transportation. However, they will be able to use land, buildings, without owner consent and set up temporary medical facilities if hospitals reach capacity. They can also seize food and medical supplies if necessary. That's just my one disagreement with this, and I don't really think it's going to be a big deal. Like, you can sit here and say that, oh, well, people are just not going to listen because they're not going to get punished for these type of things that we've been seeing in, like, the US and stuff. You can get actually fined for going out if you're not supposed to be or you don't have to. But I don't think that's going to actually be an issue here in Japan. Why now? Abe had previously said the country was not yet in a situation warranting a state of emergency declaration. He said government deliberations on the matter were made based on a range of factors such as daily infections and expected economic damage. Over the past 2 weeks, 2 people asked him to reach the decision. That was, I think, the governor of Tokyo and Osaka. A declaration of a state of emergency is not what you think or have seen in the US, Italy, or these other countries that are in a hectic situation. The government would have to pass new laws to force people to stay at home, but while there's no legal force behind the lockdown, experts say that they believe most people will adhere to the order. And I agree. I really do think people will listen because Japan has a sheep culture. They don't really question the government or go against the government wishes for the sake of like individuality that we see. We see the controversy of that in the US where like the people think the measures taking place in the US are like unconstitutional or it's an infringement of their rights. So people don't want to listen to that because they just want to do whatever they want. But Japan's more of like a collective society than places like the US. So I don't even think laws do need to be passed for people to achieve this. There are signs that Japan's medical apparatus is coming to a strain, though. Medical experts say that Japan urgently needs more doctors with specialist skills and experience to treat serious coronavirus patients. I think that is very concerning, and I think what is contributing to the emergency declaration that Japan is going to declare is that I think they've become self-evident that, hey, they're not going to be able to effectively treat people if the current measures and cases continue as they are. It warns that the intensive care units at Japanese hospitals could quickly overwhelm by surging numbers of seriously ill patients. The organization says 4 times as many nurses are required for intensive forms of treatment, and there are not many doctors who can use ventilators or ECMO machines that support breathing and heart functions. It says that about 1,000 of the approximately 6,500 beds available for intensive care in Japan may actually need to be utilized, and getting more equipment will not resolve the problem. The society calls for action to be taken to maintain an intensive care system, such as securing doctors who have experience treating seriously ill patients. Now, as with any lockdown, I think there is a fine line between whether it would be beneficial or detrimental given the circumstances that obviously depend on the individual countries and the situation and the culture. So this is an interesting social issue that has risen to question, assuming that the declaration is going to have schools being closed down. The prolonging school closure and the need to stay home affects parents-children relationship. Inaba Ai is a mother of 3 living in Yokohama. Her children have been at home every day since their school closed in early March, and she says that she's feeling the strain. We've been squabbling constantly because of the sheer length of time we spent together, and I was already worn out when the school closed. Now I never have a moment to rest. Inaba found herself being irritated when the children didn't help set up the table at meals or didn't tidy their toys away. The children no longer have contact with people other than their family and don't have the release of spending time with their school friends. Sudden increase in the amount of time they spend together is putting pressure on all members of the family. Yeah, so like Japan isn't really like a family-oriented society compared to like the Western countries. I can see how this can be an issue for like domestic violence and abuse actually in any culture, because it can be stressful to be cooped up with a bunch of people in a place 24/7. That would be an issue in Japan though, because where conversations like this aren't really welcome. They're not really progressive like the other Western countries. Japan doesn't really have an apparatus to deal with social issues, especially when it comes to like family issues. There is some statistic that I've been reading that some sources are coming out with like how other countries' divorce rates are actually going up because there's married couples are spending more time together. I think that's an interesting phenomenon, and it illustrates that people do need space from other people, even their families. So that's all I have for today. In conclusion, I would like to say that I hope you guys are prepared for an emergency declaration. Whatever you need should have been set in stone by now, but if not, I guess you kind of have like one more day to prepare for it. So stay safe and stay home, guys.